Round 4.
Salve Omnes, and welcome back to the channel. I'm long overdue a guide video, and this time we have the DLC hybrid samurai hero, Aramusha. Aramusha has had a difficult journey through For Honor's life, often being touted as one of the weakest heroes in the game before his slight buffs. The dual sword wielding warrior has some unique tricks up his sleeve with his signature blade blockade and deadly feints, so don't be fooled by those sandals. As usual, we'll begin the guide covering Aramusha's chain attacks.
Aramusha has an infinite chain called Tempest. It is performed by alternating between top attacks and side attacks using either lights or heavies. If you open the Tempest chain with a top attack, your follow-up attack used to continue must come from the side, and the same applies in reverse. Use a side attack to open, continue the chain by using a top attack. It's important to understand that this is the chain at its most basic format, and needs to be understood to learn how Aramusha's various chain interactions work. To perform a chain finisher, use a heavy attack of the same direction as your previous attack. If the last attack used in your chain was a top attack, follow up with a top heavy to end the Tempest chain. The same applies to attacks used from the left or right. Chain finishes this way can be accessed after only a single attack or later in the chain. Knowing when to utilise chain finishers is key to Aramusha's playstyle, as this allows him to access his signature deadly feints. To perform a deadly feint, input a light attack during a chain finisher. It's important to understand that you can only use a deadly feint from a direction your finisher was not. So if you used a right chain finisher, your deadly feint can only come from the top or left. Deadly feints also count as chain starters, allowing you to continue the Tempest chain. Deadly feints coming from top guard deal 15 damage, and deadly feints coming from the side deal 20 damage. All deadly feints have a speed of 400 milliseconds. Light openers from all three directions deal 15 damage and have an attack speed of 500 milliseconds. Chain top lights deal 16 damage and have an attack speed of 500 milliseconds. Chain side lights deal 17 damage and also have an attack speed of 500 milliseconds. Top heavy openers deal 25 damage and have a speed of 600 milliseconds. This is fast for a neutral heavy and allows it to beat out guard break mix-up attempts. Chain top heavies are also 600 milliseconds and deal 28 damage. Top heavy finishers clock in at 900 milliseconds and deal 40 damage. You'll notice very soon that Aramusha hits very hard on his attacks. Side heavy openers deal 40 damage and have a speed of 700 milliseconds. These also have incredibly low guard break vulnerability. Chain side heavies are also 700 milliseconds and deal 33 damage. Side heavy finishers hit for 45 damage and have an attack speed of 900 milliseconds. Although it isn't mentioned in Aramusha's moveset, he can dodge cancel the recovery of a neutral top heavy if it whiffs. This is situational at best, but it is still worth knowing, as it can be used defensively to reposition or outspace your opponent and punish. Offensively, it can be used to intentionally whiff a neutral top heavy, to bait a potential trade, or simply capitalise on an evaded attack. When you are out of lock and sprinting towards an opponent, press heavy attack to perform a sprint attack. The attack is 700 milliseconds and strikes your opponent's left guard for 25 damage. It cannot be used to start chains. If your sprint attack misses your opponent, you can utilise Befuddle to attempt another attack. By pressing heavy attack after a missed sprint attack, Aramusha will strike again with the same speed and damage, this time targeting the opponent's right guard. Take note, however, that these attacks cannot be feinted once started, so you are vulnerable to counterattacks against aware opponents. Dodge forwards and press heavy attack whilst you are in top guard to perform Rushing Wind. This attack deals 25 damage and has a speed of 600 milliseconds. Rushing Wind functions as a chain starter and has uninterruptible stance or hyper armor that starts 100 milliseconds into the attack. Hyper armor is indicated by a white flash on Aramusha and can be used to trade with opponents. Rushing Wind can be feinted, but its quick speed means that the feint must be inputted quickly as well. Dodging forwards and pressing heavy attack whilst your guard is either to the left or right will perform Rushing Wind alternate. This variation of the attack is slightly slower, at 700 milliseconds, and deals 20 damage. Rushing Wind Alternate does not have hyper armor like the top guard variant, but still functions as a chain starter and can be feinted. Aramusha's zone attack consists of two parts. The first hit strikes your opponent's left guard for 15 damage and has a speed of 500 milliseconds. The second part targets the opponent's right guard and has a speed of 1000 milliseconds, but deals much higher damage at 35. The second part of the zone also gains the unblockable property, forcing your opponent into making a decision. The second part of the zone attack can be feinted, providing that you don't run out of stamina during the first hit. Aramusha's other signature technique is the blade blockade. Whilst it may look simple, the blade blockade has certain features and restrictions that must be understood to properly utilise it. It is performed by moving your guard direction downwards. Unlike other stances and full blocks, Aramusha's blockade is only active temporarily. It has a very quick startup time of 100 milliseconds and is active for 400 milliseconds. During those 400 milliseconds, Aramusha has full guard in all directions and will superior block any regular attack that hits the blockade. If the blockade does not block any attacks, however, the recovery is 500 milliseconds and you cannot counter guard break during the blade blockade's active or recovery frames. With this in mind, you should use the blockade with caution, as it can be baited out and punished easily by the entire roster. After a successful blade blockade, immediately press light attack to perform Ring the Bell. This is an unblockable attack that interrupts your opponent and deals 15 damage. It also causes a stun effect, blinding your opponent. This is Aramusha's most consistent blade blockade punish and his safest option in 1v1s, given its ability to interrupt opponent chains and other actions. Just make sure that your light input is immediate. Delaying your input will use a normal light attack instead, which in turn can be punished by your opponent. Fury Unleashed is performed by inputting a top heavy after a successful blade blockade. The attack deals 30 damage and is 500 milliseconds. Fury Unleashed functions as a chain starter and also has uninterruptible stance or hyper armor. Unfortunately, Fury Unleashed isn't too consistent. Against low recovery attacks or by using delayed inputs, your attack can be blocked and in some cases even parried. Because of this, Fury Unleashed requires character matchup knowledge to get the most out of it. After a successful blade blockade, input either a left side or right side heavy attack to perform Twin Vipers. Twin Vipers deals 40 damage and has a speed of 1000 milliseconds. It is an unblockable attack that functions as a chain starter and also has hyper armor. Twin Vipers can also be used to start deadly feints, provided that you only use the top and opposite side of your attack when using a deadly feint. It must be understood that Twin Vipers is not confirmed on your opponent, except in situations where they are locked into a move, such as Berserker's zone attack. Twin Vipers can also be feinted normally, useful for mix-up options or simply to retain safety if used on a wrong input. The final option available from the blockade is the pushback kick, which true to its name has significant pushback. You can perform this by pressing guard break after a successful blade blockade. Aramusha will kick the opponent, dealing stamina damage and causing a stun effect. The kick also has hyper armor and has a speed of 500 milliseconds. The kick is capable of ledging opponents, pushing them into other environmental hazards and causing a wall splat. The kick is the other reliable tool of the blade blockade and should be prioritized if your opponent has their back to a wall or other environmental hazard. Time to cover Aramusha's punishers. On a guard break, you get a top heavy for 25 damage. Side heavies are too slow and can be blocked. Wall splats are very generous to Aramusha. You can easily get a side heavy for 40 damage, regardless of where your guard was prior to the throw. Aramusha does have very short throw distance with a backwards throw, however, so keep that in mind. The exact same punish also applies if you got a wall splat via a pushback kick, side heavy for 40 damage. When parrying a heavy attack, Aramusha is able to get a top heavy for 25 damage due to the attack's quick speed. Any neutral light attack and the first part of the zone attack is also confirmed, but they deal less damage. When parrying an opponent's light attack, you get your side heavy for 40 damage. Aramusha is one of the few characters that gets nothing from a guard break when out of stamina. For some reason, Aramusha's lights lose so much speed that he is unable to deal any damage in this scenario.
If you are near a wall, however, when you guard break your opponent, you can get something if you're able to side throw. Aramusha is able to get a side heavy for 40 damage. Parrying a light attack when you are out of stamina grants you a light attack of your own for 15 damage. Direction doesn't matter. When throwing an out of stamina opponent, throw forwards or to the right and pay attention to your guard. In top guard, you throw a light and a heavy attack without changing your guard direction for a total of 55 damage. If your guard is to the side, once again always throw either forwards or to the right and the input is the same. Light attack and heavy attack without changing your guard direction for a total of 60 damage. If you throw your opponent to the left or behind you, then Aramusha will be out of range and whiff the first attack of this punish. When parrying an out of stamina opponent, the punish is side heavy into side heavy for an absurd total of 85 damage, making this one of the most damaging out of stamina punishes in the game. Revenge activation nets you 2 side heavies provided that you buffer the input of the first heavy. Total damage is 111. Iron Lungs lets you sprint when out of stamina and recover your stamina faster while running. It's very dangerous to disengage from enemies when you're out of stamina, so this feat has selectively little use and is very weak when compared to Aramusha's other tier 1 options. Body Count recovers 2 HP and 2 stamina each time you kill a minion, archer or pikeman. Arguably the go-to pick for Dominion. Aramusha has very good minion clear with his infinite Tempest chain, and this lets him sustain mid quite well. Deadly gives you a 15% attack buff that lasts for 3 seconds after you hit an enemy with an attack. 5-second cooldown. Useful for quicker pikeman clear in Breach, but the main selling point of this feat is the increased chain damage and out of stamina punish damage. Smoke Bomb, as the name suggests, throws down a smoke bomb on the ground which covers a 10 meter AoE radius from the point of activation. The smoke lasts for 10 seconds and has a 100-second cooldown. Enemies inside the smoke are blinded, cannot lock on, capture points or attempt revives, or use other interactions such as the cauldron or offerings. Allies within the smoke are protected from the effects of Marked for Death, Scout and Doom Banner. Smoke Bomb is a very strong area denial feat that has staggering potential. It can secure the healing point in Breach when otherwise contested, prevent the enemy team from stealing the offerings in Tribute or the shield banner in Breach, or even reviving fallen allies that are surrounded by pikemen, a highly recommended choice for tier 2. Juggernaut grants you 50% damage reduction, passive hyper armor, and slippery, which is the ability to automatically counter guard break where a counter guard break is possible. You also have reduced movement speed and cannot sprint. This lasts for 10 seconds and has a 90-second cooldown. If anyone tries to attack you while this is active, then you can simply guard break them in their attack recovery. It can give you a bit more sustain with the damage reduction, but you also run the risk of your opponents simply waiting outside of your range for this feat to run out. Rocksteady grants you immunity to wall splat punishers and prevents you from being unbalanced when you are out of stamina or when being auto-parried by revenge activation. It also prevents certain character-specific punishers like Highlander's Caber Toss and Centurion's Charge Jab. Jormungandr, however, does not care for this feat and can still knock you down with their bashes. Defensively, this feat is amazing. You can forget about certain punishers hurting you, and this lets you throw attacks at enemies trying to hold on to revenge without fear of a knockdown. Whether you take this or Smoke Bomb, however, is your choice. Second Wind recovers 50 HP when used. It also cleanses any bleed or fire damage. 2-minute cooldown. Still one of the best feats in the game despite its cooldown increase. Emergency healing can save you from a nasty fire flask or nail bomb, or just keep you alive long enough to stall for your team. It heals underneath shields as well, which can undermine bleed-focused heroes such as Nobushi or Peacekeeper that would otherwise kill you when revenge runs out. Sharpened Blade lets every attack deal 10 bleed damage in 2 ticks of 5 for 30 seconds, 150-second cooldown. While this feat isn't bad for some heroes, it's not particularly good for Aramusha. Giving up Second Wind is a hard sell, and Musha does so much damage that it's arguable that he doesn't need this. However, if you play competitive scrims, then it's probably worth a go. Flaming Arrow fires an arrow at an opponent that deals 20 physical damage and 40 fire damage. 2-minute cooldown. Not the best of projectile feats given that fire is so easily cleansed by healing feats and just being in a zone. 2 minutes is quite a long time for a chance at 60 damage. That said, it is a serviceable feat and unique to Aramusha, although not recommended. Arrow Storm fires off 5 waves of 50 damage arrow volleys in a 15 meter AoE radius. This feat can only be used outside and has a 3-minute cooldown. This feat is hard to use. On one hand, you can clear waves of minions, pikemen, and do damage to the ram, and even get a full team kill if the opponents are badly positioned. On the other hand, however, this requires your opponents to be unaware that you're using this feat and that they're unable to escape. This feat also does significant damage to your allies, making it a difficult choice to recommend. Stalwart Banner places a banner down which generates an area that heals allies stood within. The banner heals a total of 135 HP over 20 seconds and also cleanses any bleed or fire. The banner remains active if you are killed, 3-minute cooldown. Despite the long cooldown and the fact that the healing isn't particularly quick, this feat can make a huge difference in teamfights. It can mitigate other opposing feats like Sharpened Blade and Fire Flask, and is an excellent choice for a defender in Breach, as this is one of the very few ways that you can heal the commander. Fear itself creates an 8 meter AoE radius that moves with you and lasts for 20 seconds. Enemies around you take 50% more damage, 3-minute cooldown. Best used with a coordinated team, although Aramusha's already high damage skyrockets with this active. The best uses are for team assaults against the Guardian or Commander in Breach. Aegis is a situational perk that only really helps you if you can maintain a shield. It complements well with Shields Up and Vengeful Barrier. Shields Up is just extra HP, usable but not amongst Musha's strongest perks. The same can be said of Bulk Up. 16 extra hit points if you can max out your renown will keep you alive a little longer. Last Stand's 40% damage reduction is a good buff, but fighting in critical health means you're not benefiting as much as the perk would have you believe. Vengeful Barrier is still a very powerful perk, allowing you to potentially proc revenge multiple times in a fight, which in turn will reactivate the perk. Bastion's 10% damage reduction might not seem like much, but the fact that you'll do a lot of fighting in zones or by the ram cement its utility. Finally, Fresh Focus is a very strong defensive perk that helps you regen stamina when exhausted very quickly. A good choice, but almost made obsolete if used with the Rocksteady feat.
Round 5.
In conclusion, Aramusha is kind of a badly designed hero. On one hand, his blade blockade has unreliable options, and deadly feints while damaging eat up stamina and can be severely punished. It doesn't help that he lacks proper combat-suitable footwear. However, Aramusha has ludicrously high damage and relatively safe parries due to the very low guard break vulnerability on his heavy openers. Not to mention a top heavy for a heavy parry is too much. If you found this guide helpful, then please leave it a like and consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Remember to tick the bell icon to receive notifications of new content, and please comment down below if I've missed anything out or you have any questions. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao for now.